Hello everyone, today we're going to be covering using Ruby on Rails as an API for a Vue front-end application that'll have all of the basic CRUD actions. We can delete these posts, we can add a new post, we can edit that post, and when we do it'll scroll us up to the top, which looks really cool. We can add like a 24 and a 48 to this post title and body. You can see that gets updated, you can see stuff in the console happening. We can also add another one like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, hit create. If we edit this 4, 5, 6 one right here, you'll see that smooth scrolling going up to the top. And of course, all of this is being tracked inside of the Rails app so that if we stop the server and start up the Vue server again, everything is still here. You'll also see when we stop it and start it, it's super snappy because it's running off Vite, and Vue is a pretty good combination, does stuff real quick, saves you a lot of time. Anyways, enough about me talking, let's go ahead and do this. To get started, we're going to have to stop our Rails app, CD out of it, do Control plus a bunch of times so you guys can see what I'm doing, and then we'll hit a Control L. Okay, so first thing I want to do is create the Rails app. We're going to say Rails new, call it video, and then do a -- API. I call it video because I'm making a video, of course. You can call it whatever you would like. You could even literally call it whatever you would like. We'll go ahead and CD into the video. Inside of here, we need to, first of all, run a code dot because I always forget to do this. Then what we can do is come into our gem file. Inside of our gem file right here, we can hit Control plus a couple times, hopefully, to scroll in, and then hit F11 and Control B to hide the side panel. We want to come down to line 37 where we have this gem rack-cores, uncomment that, hit Control S. We can then come over to our console, run a bundle, and that should install that gem. We can then come over to our side panel, config initializers cores.rb, hit Control B to hide the side panel, Control and question mark to uncomment all of this. And then in here, we can grab all of this and change it to an asterisk. You can also leave it as like localhost port 5173, which it looks like is what Vite runs on. But an asterisk will allow everything to use this application. Of course, in production, you only want to allow approved applications, but in development, you're probably fine doing this. Once you have that, the last thing to do is create the posts. You can also call them like to-dos if you would like. It really doesn't matter. It's just for the sake of showing you how to do CRUD stuff through an API with Vue. So we're going to do a Rails G scaffold. We'll call them posts, give each post a title and body of type text. Go ahead and run that. And then at this point, we can do a Rails DB :migrate and a Rails S to start the server. Now, depending on how you want to do this, you can then open up another terminal, go into this same location. In my case, I'll stop the Vue server and I'll CD out of it. And then I'll CD into the video project. Inside of here, we want to create our front-end application, which we'll just call client. So I'll say npm create Vite at latest. We can go ahead and run that. We can call this the client. We can choose Vue from our list, JavaScript, and then we can CD into client, run a npm I to install, and then we can run a npm run dev to start this server. And then we can come over here, refresh, and we now have our count working. So that's working perfectly fine. The only other thing is in the Rails app at the top under app, controllers, post controller, we are going to be updating posts, which means we have to pass back the ID for the post. And the way that we're going to do this is in here in the parameters, we'll just permit an ID parameter as well to save that. That works just fine. And then we should be good to start on the actual JavaScript stuff. Okay, so we'll close this, come over to our side panel. And then in here, we want to come into the clients, the src, and the app.vue. The app.vue. And I think the other place we want to come into is going to be in the components, but we'll have to take a look at that in a second here. So the first thing is in the app.vue, we have all of this stuff inside of this div. You might also get an error saying something about like the module exports, or it's going to yell at you for some reason. It might, if you like move this down Let's move this down right here. You might see that like your template, the opening bracket is highlighted. From what I can tell, based on some GitHub issues, that is a problem with the Viter extension pack if you're using it in Vue 3. And it feels like pretty much everyone has moved over to the Volar extension pack, which is the Vue language features pack. So maybe try uninstalling Viter, installing the Vue language features, and then restarting VS Code, and then see if that fixes some of the errors you're getting, because that's sort of what worked for me. Of course, your mileage may vary. But okay, we have this. We're going to move these two links right here out of here. We don't need those. We're going to create a new component. We're going to call this the posts.view. Then we can come back into our app.view. We want to change this hello world to a posts. It's not going to take in this message. We are going to move this up here because this needs to be inside of this div. That way the template has one child. If the template has more than one, it will get mad at you, maybe. And then we can come down here. Instead of importing hello world, we want to import posts from posts.view. And we don't need this styling down here, but we can keep it. We can get rid of it. Doesn't matter, whatever makes you happy. In my case, I'll just get rid of it and leave the styling empty. So if we come over here, we can refresh, and you'll see at least one template or script is required in a single file component, which of course means the post needs to have at least one template or a script, which we have right here. So we want to come into the post, and we want to make sure that we have those in here. To do that, we can start by creating the template. I'll use some Emmet to fail to tab complete this. So we'll just do it manually, I guess, making a clown of myself. So in general, Vue is going to have a template. It's going to have a script tag, and it's going to take setup inside of it. Go ahead and close the script. And then the last thing is the scoped styles. Now, in terms of the scoped styles, we are going to copy and paste two blocks of styling. They are very similar. They are just for the input for the title and the input for the body, so that the application looks a little bit better. I don't want you guys to suffer too much while you watch this. Then we can come into the template, do a div, and inside of this div is where all of our HTML is going to happen. So the first thing we did was we had the H1 for the posts. We can go ahead and save that. You can see the post appears right there. Super cool. The next thing we had was the inputs. So we can actually organize this. I'm going to Control B to hide the side panel. You can organize this a bit with some comments. So we'll just do something like this. And the benefit of doing these comments, if you have GitHub Copilot, of course, is the autocomplete. But I'm not here to sell you on GitHub Copilot because this isn't a sponsored video. But we can start by doing the input. We'll give it a type equal to text. Equal to text. And then in here we can do the v-model equal to a title. It did it again. I don't know what I'm doing. We can do a placeholder for the title, and we can do a class for the title input. We can go ahead and close this. And we're going to have something very similar here for the body. So I'm just going to come over here and paste this. And then the input type will stay as text. The v-model here will be the body. The placeholder will be the word body. And the class will be the body input. So that takes care of our inputs right here. Our inputs right here. It'll look just like this when you're done, hopefully. The next thing we can do is add the edit buttons. Now, the reason why we're doing the edit buttons right away is because it's actually some pretty clever logic. And I get to say that because GitHub Copilot made it, so I'm not patting my own ego too much by saying it. I'm going to move this over a little bit so that we can hopefully still see everything. Basically, what this does is it does a v-if. It checks if this variable is editing is true, and then it has a @click, which is your on click, that'll call a function called update post. So we can come down into our script, and we can actually create that update post, assuming I can find it in the notes over here. So for the update post right now, we're just going to do a const update post equals an async, and then we can do an arrow, and then in here we'll just return true. Just something for right now so that it doesn't error out, but we get to at least stub it out a bit, right? So the next thing we can do is a similar button, but this one's going to be our cancel button. And again, it's going to check if we're editing. So if we're editing, we want to show both of these buttons. So now we need to create this cancel edit function. which is going to happen down here, which thankfully GitHub Copilot helps me make. Now this one doesn't need to be async because it's just going to toggle a Boolean for us. The last thing we need to do is come down here and say, okay, we're not editing. So in this case, we want to create a new post. So in that case, let me just copy this over. We want a button with a else with an @ that says create post, which just has the word create. And you'll see that button appear as soon as you save that. So now we can create this create post function. To get started here, we want to sort of come in here and we want to import ref from view. And we also want to import onMounted. And then we can come over here and we can say const posts equals a ref, and then we pass in an empty array. And you'll notice that this looks very similar to what we do in React if you care about React at all. And we're just going to be using refs instead of a use state here. So we have our title, we have our body, we're going to have a post ID. Now, the reason why we're calling this post ID is because we are going to be using a regular ID in some functions. And in all honesty, I haven't slept in like 24 hours, so I can't think my way around refactoring this. It might be worth looking at if you'd like to. But in my case, I just went with a post ID, so I didn't have to think too much. So after we have all of those, we now have the ability to set these and use these. So we can come into our create post function. So let's come down here, say const create post async. It wants to return true, but we actually don't need to do that here. Instead, what I'd like to do is maybe say that we need a, I guess we could say a const API underscore URL and set this equal to this location right here. So this will let us use this API URL inside of our functions. What we want to do now is create a response, say const res equals an await, or we call fetch. And then in this fetch, we want to pass in the API URL with a method of post. The headers need to include the content type application/JSON so that Rails knows this is cool to use. The body is going to be a JSON.stringify where the object includes the title, which comes from the title.value, which is this input bar right here. And the body is the body.value, which is this input bar right here. Which corresponds to these two refs. So when you change one of these in your inputs, you are going to be changing this ref itself. So that's how it's getting those values. Once we have that, we can then come down here. We can then do a const data equals await response.json. Then we can do a post.value.push where we push that data. And then after we do that, we can do a title.value equals the empty string, a body.value equals the empty string, and just in case, we can do a post_id.value equals 0, just to make sure that's cleaned up. We can come over here and we can check our Rails console real quick, and we can do a test and a case in the Rails console. We can click create. We can see in here that just off of this logic right here from this create post and these variables and these two inputs and this one button, we are able to create this. So if we come over here and refresh, you'll see that test case appearing in our Rails app. Over here on the view side of things, we're not actually rendering this yet. So maybe we should make sure that we can see the posts as they come in. To do that, we're going to come below this create button. We can create this list of posts. And then down here, we can do a div, which is a v-4. And then in here, we can do a post in posts. We have the key, which is the post.id. And then in here, we can create a, I think I had an H5, not an H3, not that it really matters. We have an H5 for the post title. And in here, what I actually did was inside of square brackets, I created 2 more braces and I said, let's make this the post.id, just like that. And then that causes everything to error out, of course. We then have our H5, our post.body, and then after the post.body, what I had was a button with an @click that called a function called edit post, and we passed in the post.id with the edit button. After that, we also had a button that was the delete post function, which took in the post.id again, and it just had the delete text right there. After all of that was done, we then close this div, hopefully, tab it over, and we should have those things set up now. Now, of course, we need to make sure we actually get these posts. So how do we do that? Well, we have this on mounted that we imported. So we can actually come down here below the posts, and we can do something like, and GitHub Copilot's here to the rescue again. We can do an async where we call a const res is equal to an await.fetch or an await fetch. But in here, it's doing the same thing that it was trying to do down here. I would rather use the API URL and move all of these up here in front of the posts, just like that. And now if we refresh, you'll see that this one unmounted is causing us to grab the data from our database right here. So we're already pulling this, we're now getting it, and we're creating it. The last two things to do are the update and the destroy. Now the destroy is actually pretty easy. We click this button and we should be calling a function that we called delete post. So let's come down here. We have the create, the update. Let's do the destroy real quick. We'll say right here, const delete post. This is going to be an async, takes in the ID, does not return true. Instead, what I would like this to do is I would like it to call an await fetch. We can then go to the API URL slash the ID that we're taking in. We pass in a method of delete. And then down here, what we want to do is a posts.value is going to be equal to posts.value.filter. And then we grab the post by ID, and we grab the one where, or we only grab the post where the ID does not equal the ID that we're passing in. So we delete it on the remote, and then locally we also remove it from the list. So we can come in here, refresh. Let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, create a test one real quick, and then we'll click delete. You can see it's gone. We can also delete the test case one, and they are gone for real. If we come over here and refresh, they're gone. We can come down here and we'll see those delete requests rolling through. Okay, cool. So now we're deleting. The last thing we want to do is the update. And this is the one that's a little bit more involved because we do need to handle the cancel. We need to make sure that we're scrolling up to the top and doing all that other stuff. Let's start by doing a couple test examples here so that we have two to work with. Now, when we click the update post button, when we click the edit button, first of all, I want it to scroll us up to the top. So let's scroll up here. We have this edit post function. Let's create this, or method if you're so inclined. Let's create an edit post. Now we don't want this to return true. Instead, what we want to do is we want to come in here. We want to say the const post is equal to the post.value.find. Grab the post by its ID. So we only grab the post where the ID is equal to the ID we're taking in. Then we can say the title.value is equal to the post.title. Let's go ahead and save this real quick. Let's click edit on this one, and you'll see that sets the title.value to be the post.title. And this title.value corresponds to this model that we set up here, which was the v- model for the title. Now let's do the body. Come down here. We can grab the same thing, body.value equals post.body. We'll click edit. And you'll see that case appears in here. We can click edit on this one instead, and now we have those values. Cool. Next thing we want to do is set the post ID.value to be equal to the post ID, because we're going to be passing back the ID to the database when we say we want to edit, the ID of 23. We do need some semblance of a reference to that, so that's how we grab it. The next thing we want to do is just say is editing.value is set to true. That way we can keep track of the fact that we are editing, so we want to change these buttons. And then the magic secret sauce, the I'm so smart for my own good stuff, we call window.scroll2 to the surprise of no one that's done this before. But if you haven't seen it before, you think someone's really smart. In reality, I just said, hey, GitHub Copilot, can you smooth scroll me? And it figured it out. But we don't have to talk about that. If we click edit now, it'll just scroll us up to the top like that. So it's a nice touch, adds that little bit of polish, makes it seem like we know what we're doing. Cool. Okay, so now the cancel edit button. Let's do that real quick. So when I click cancel, it gets rid of this. This one's actually pretty easy. All we do in here is we just reset the title.value, body.value, post.id, and the is editing to false. So if we save this, come in here, click edit, click cancel, it just resets itself. Cool. The last one we have to do is the update post. Of course, this is going to be similar to how we did the create post up here. We're going to just tab this over real quick. It's going to come in here and say the const response is equal to an await, where we fetch the API URL slash the post ID.value. We give it a method of put, the content type of an application JSON. The body is going to be the title, the body, and the ID, which is going to be the post underscore ID.value, just like that. After we have this response constructed, we can then send it back. We should get the const data back from it, right? After we have the const data, we then grab the post by its ID. We grab the post.value index equal to the data. It's a strange way of doing all of this. And then it sets the title.value, the body.value, and the post ID.value to the default amounts. The is editing to false. So let's come in here and let's test this. This is GitHub Copilot generated, so I don't know if this is going to work. Let's change this to hello and world, and then we'll click update. So that did push it back. That did update it right here. Let's scroll down. We have hello world appearing. And in this case, we are now doing all of the CRUD actions, apparently. So we can create a post. We can say create a post, right? Create it. That goes to the backend. We can see right here it was inserted. We can come over here and refresh. We'll see create a post with an ID of 5. Right here it has an ID of 5. If we refresh, it's still there. We can edit it. It scrolls us up to the top. We say create 2. We can update it. It now says create 2 down here. And then we can delete all of these if we so desire. So there you go. That is the CRUD actions for a Vite/Vue application using a Rails 7 API, done in about 20 minutes, similar to the React one we did the other day, except that one involved like action cable and stuff. It seems like 20 minutes is kind of the standard. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully this was interesting, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.